Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 22nd and tonight's movie is Let Me In. Let Me In is a 2010 American movie that is a direct remake of the 2008 Swedish movie Let the Right One In. It was written and directed by Matt Reeves, who also directed Cloverfield, which I liked a lot. I saw this one and I'm gonna give this one a 6 out of 10. It's not bad, but it isn't really that good either. The plot of Let Me In is that there's this young boy, I think he's like middle school age, named Owen, who lives in New Mexico, and he's bullied, he doesn't have a lot of friends, his parents are estranged, yada yada yada. A new group of people moved into the apartment next to us, and when he's hanging out at night, sometimes he runs across the girl who lives there, is about his age, named Abby. The two of them become friends and eventually form an emotional bond with each other. But, since nothing can ever be simple in a movie like this, it turns out that Abby is a vampire. The rest of the movie is essentially Owen having to deal with the fact that this nice, sweet girl that he fell in love with also happens to be an immortal undead abomination. Now, for some reason, this only occurred to me like halfway through watching this movie. This is a lot like Twilight. A lot of it is set up just the way that Twilight was set up. I haven't read or seen Twilight, but I know enough about it to know that it's a story about teens for teens. But this one is more like a story about children for adults, so it's a different perspective on the whole thing. The two leads are played by Cody Smith-McPhee and Chloe Moretz, both of which were between like 12 and 14 when this movie was being made. And I think that they both do a really good job. They have chemistry together. Some of the best moments in Let Me In are scenes of the two of them just hanging out together. There's a lot of sweet moments between these two. One thing I do want to talk about is the effects. Now, there is one really good, special effects makeup moment in this movie. There's this really good, acid burn makeup, and it looks great. But all the other effects in this movie are pretty bad. It only ever really goes into effects when it's animating Abby, going crazy. And it's just so weird. It's sped up, it's CG'd. She just looks like a monkey, crawling all over people. You see her go up the side of a building, climb up a tree, and it just looks bad. It's not intimidating at all. It looks stupid. Considering that Avatar had already been released at that point, I don't think that there was any excuse for a high-budget Hollywood movie to have CG in it that looked that bad. That's not the biggest problem with Let Me In, though. The biggest problem is that while the dialogue is good, the leads work well together, it has good cinematography, the story is profoundly cliched and predictable. This movie did absolutely nothing that surprised me. It's full of so many things that we've seen before, and while it still does them well, it doesn't do it in a new way. The strongest example of that are the bully characters. Now, this is supposed to take place in the 80s, but I'm pretty sure that even in the 80s, these characters were cliched and overdone. It's just stock, standard, cardboard cutout bully characters. They're like the bullies from Jeff the Killer, or It. Their motivations are ridiculous. There's barely any humanity to them. They do establish that the lead one has an older brother who bullies him in exactly the same way that he bullies Owen. But other than that, there's absolutely nothing to the guy. And they picked a pretty bad actor for the part. Now, I'm not saying that his performance is terrible. He's obviously doing his best, but they just picked the wrong kid to play this bully. And I do know this actor. He went on to play one of the leads in Don't Breathe. And in that movie, he was casted properly. He was kind of a nerd, a doof. And in this movie, he plays the schoolyard bully. Just the way he looks, the way he talks, the way he acts. In any other movie, I feel like he would be the one getting picked on by the bullies. None of this is interesting to me because they don't do anything new with the cliches, they just repeat it. There's also just the fact that I don't think that it ever even occurs to Owen to tell the teacher about these kids terrorizing him. At one point they go on a school field trip to a frozen lake, and the bullies come up to him and they say we're gonna push him in the water, and he picks up a metal rod, and after the encouragement of Abby at one point in the movie, he decides to fight back, and he hits him in the head with the rod and he splits his ear, and then later on you see him in the principal's office, and then they're we're going to suspend you. I was thinking did he not even think of telling them about what they were gonna do, what they've been doing to him all this time? Because the lead bully had already cut his face at that point in the movie. Their story arc ends exactly the way you think it would be, but just for the sake of staying consistent with the format I set up, I'm going to save talking about that for the spoiler section. Now, in all the cliches, there was also this one really weird thing. Owen lives with his mother, and there were two things they said about her. One is that she's like a hyper religious Christian. There's nothing that ever really comes of that. And two, it's weird. We never get a good look at her face. It's always far away, or like cut off, or she's facing away from the camera. It's a lot like The Strangers. Nothing comes of that either. Like, are they acknowledging that she's just a nothing of a character? Because she really is. She has, like, no effect on anything in this movie. It isn't bad as much as it is just, like, really odd, and I have no idea what they were going for with it. Overall, Wall Let Me In is very well made. It's well executed, it's well directed, the acting is great. It suffers from having just this textbook story. I'd imagine that I'd have the same problem with Let the Right One In as well, because I read the synopsis and it really just seems like beat for beat the same movie. There are enough good things in Let Me In. There are enough things that sort of take you away from the cliches for it to overall not be a bad movie. But I think that there are a lot better examples out there of good vampire movies, good horror movies, good romance, just stuff like that. Let Me In was mostly just okay to me. Now let's go into some spoilers. Now, I don't want to blow anyone's minds here, but the bully story arc in this horror movie ends with them getting their comeuppance and getting injured/killed. Owen was at a pool and the gang of bullies, including the lead bully's older brother, they lock the teacher out, and then the older brother holds his head underwater and he says that if you don't drown in 3 minutes, I'll just cut you in the cheek, but if not, I'll stab your eyes out. He just happens to be a sociopath, and you just throw him in at the end. Now, of course, right as Owen is about to drown, Abby comes in, and I think she kills all of them. You definitely see the older brother's, severed head and, cut off limbs. So, if they weren't killed, they were pretty violently injured. Now, rewinding a bit. Abby had, a caretaker. They revealed that, way back, decades and decades ago, we never established exactly how old she is, but she apparently got turned into a vampire when she was 12, and she had a friend at the time who ends up being an old man who lives with her. He gets her blood and stuff like that. He ends up dying. This means that Abby is all alone, so she tries to live with Owen. And they establish that she has to be invited in every single time, hence the title, or else she starts bleeding from the scalp. That was actually a pretty good moment of gore and horror in this movie. She demonstrated what would happen if she walks into a house without being invited in, and it's some pretty good practical effects there. Anyway, she lives there for a night or something, and then a cop who's been trying to investigate all the murders that have happened ever since Abby got there, he comes in, he tries to catch her, but she goes crazy, bites him, and then she realizes that there are too many bodies and that she has to leave. Now, it started out with her just leaving, she gets a taxi and just goes off in the night, but after that, the thing in the pool happened, and she saves him, and then the last scene in the movie is him on a train with this big trunk that she's in, going off to who knows where. Now, obviously, this isn't going to end well, they're both children, but the movie plays it off as a happy ending, and then it just sort of ends. I don't think that Let Me In is anything special, but for what it is, it does get the job done. Now, I already said in my Afflicted review that I didn't really care much for vampire stories. Maybe this whole movie just isn't my thing in the first place. Obviously, other people got something from this movie. It was critically acclaimed, especially for an American remake of a foreign movie. Maybe you'll like it. I don't know. But I mostly just thought it was okay. I'll see you tomorrow.